You're listening to the Empowering Process podcast with your host, Gail Kraft. Listen as she holds frank discussions around how your purpose, being present, and trusting your power impacts your life. Whether you're an entrepreneur, leader, or developing your vision, you'll find wisdom and insights you can utilize right now. Welcome your host, Gail Kraft.
Well, hello, everybody. Gail Kraft here from the Empowering Process podcast. And I have with me a pretty amazing woman, Meena Ruchi. So Meena is the founder of Meena Ruchi Magic, and we're going to talk a little bit about that magic. But before we do, we're going to talk about why she got into the types of things that she's doing. We're going to talk about anxiety and stress and feeling less than, and doing what doesn't fit, doing what other people expect of us, and blah 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 blah. Because that is honestly not an unusual story, especially for women, right? And yes, men fall into having to play the male role, and what does that even mean anymore? But as a woman, we have learned that our role is to diminish ourselves. So welcome to the Empowering Process, Meena.
Hi, Gail. Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Isn't she just adorable? Listen to her giggles. We're going to hear her giggles through the whole thing. And there was a time when she really didn't kind of giggle quite so much, right?
Yeah, it was more like manically laughing through the pain.
So,
Yeah.
so let's talk a little bit about what your life was like then, pre this
Yeah.
beautiful, shiny Meena.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, yeah. So in the beginning, I was a little baby that just kind of came into this world with some anxiety. Some of my earliest memories are being scared and anxious, like in a crib. So that has been with me. That was with me for a long time. And I just, because it was like there from the like literal beginning for me, I just thought that was like my personality. I was like, this is the way like everybody feels. So it's not a problem. There's nothing wrong here. I just thought it was normal. And along with that, like anxiety was this weird desire to know why I was here. I just had this existential wondering from a pretty young age. And so when those two qualities got together, it became this sense of urgency to figure out why I was here. And so I hated wasting time, and I just wanted to like get on with the quest, figure out what I was here to do, and then do it and like get my little gold star and like
Get it behind me. Oh, I love it. Get the
yeah,
gold star, right? Right.
yeah. So that was like my whole thing. And as I got older, the anxiety got more intense. And when I went to college, it absolutely got out of control. And it like devolved into all kinds of things. It was like the center, and from there, like it grew all these different like heads. So it like turned into burnout, it turned into an eating disorder, it turned into not sleeping for days at a time. So I had all these health problems, and I was completely addicted to my work. I would work for like days at a time without stopping. And that like really wore my body down. It wore my mind down, as you could imagine. And I wasn't super fun to be around. And that wondering of like, why am I here? That became even more urgent. And I would say it became a desperation. I was desperate to know why I was here.
So let's stop there a little bit and take some time to kind of unpack fear, anxiety, desperation. Um, and you mentioned manically working. That
Mm-hmm.
at work and diving yourself and burying your head in that kind of achievement is a way to feel, at least for me, to feel validated, right? During my trauma, manifestation. So if you don't deal with trauma, it will manifest, right? And it'll come out in a bunch of different ways, which is what's happening. And what happens with, school or work, when you dive in and succeed, you get that gold star, you get the 100, you get the raise, you get the promotion, you get the pat on the back, you get the recognition, you get that gold star. And that's validation that I exist. You validate that I am real. But then the next day or the next moment, it's gone. And so you
Yeah.
hunger, well, then where is my validation? And so then you
Yeah.
start to get anxiety and to get a little bit of, a panic stricken. So you've got the fear, you've got the anxiety, you've got the
You have this like
value,
addiction to like productivity and validation.
right?
Yeah.
Right.
Validation of I am good enough. I am doing enough. I must be doing something reasonably, remotely in the right direction, maybe.
Right.
And yeah, it's like I feel like it was an addiction, just like substance addictions are, but it's different and it's subtle because it's absolutely like revered in our culture to work hard. And like there's nothing better you can do than to be a hard worker and to achieve
Oh
and
my
things like
God, a high energy achiever, right?
yeah.
I used to
So
be called, my nickname was the executor, and not because I would kill people, but I would get things done that
yeah.
no one else for some reason could get done. Right. And it's
Yeah.
because of that focus and that need to get that validation.
Yeah. And it wasn't coming from being like, and it's like all these layers, right? It's like people thought I was a very ambitious person and they were like, oh, yeah, she's so hardworking. Like, wow, she works so hard. Like, wow, she's so high achieving. And underneath it, the motivating force wasn't like, oh, I'm having fun doing this. I really enjoy this. It wasn't motivated from a clean energy. It was like, I'm absolutely terrified I'm going to die if I don't do this. So yeah, if the options are like work hard or you sincerely believe you're gonna die if you don't, like of course anyone would be hardworking,
Right.
you know? So it wasn't this like admirable quality. It was like I'm scared to death that I am not gonna be okay if I don't do this.
Right.
So um yeah, not great, not a great place to be. And
So
from
what happened that got you out of it? Because that's a hamster wheel that's almost impossible to get off of, right?
yeah. So what like happened the first, it was kind of like a long wake up call, but the first thing that happened was my like body began to deteriorate. And so it was like when the inner fear manifested as like mental problems, like anxiety, burnout, like crippling, hard to function, that I could ignore because I was like, I've felt this way my whole life and it's just slowly getting worse. That's fine.
That's
Like,
what
why
happens when you get
not?
older.
Whatever.
It gets worse, right?
Yeah, I was like, that's fine. And so, but it was when like my joints weren't working and like I had so much pain. The pain actually had been there for a long time too, but like joints not working, like hair falling out. I had rashes all over my body and I couldn't like it would hurt to move, like to sit up and like stand. It hurt, like my knees hurt. I had to stop running because like I felt like I just couldn't like they just didn't work. Stuff stopped working. And so like yeah, all kinds of like weird health things. And so it got to a point where I just couldn't ignore it anymore. And what was weird is like no one else really thought that there was a problem. They were like, you seem a little stressed, like you should chill out, but they weren't like you need to stop. Like there was no real intervention or real like mirroring of like there's a problem. So I was like, well, no one else is worried about it. I shouldn't be worried about it. But it came to a point where like it was physically like an issue. And so I couldn't ignore it anymore. And so that's when I started eating again, because I like hadn't eaten properly in like years at that point. And so that kind of helped settle things down. And then I was able to finish school because like my body had kind of like settled a little bit. And then after that, the big thing that happened was like I had been so burnt out. And like you said, it's a hamster wheel. Even though I'd been burnt out for a long time, I couldn't stop because it's like the momentum of that. You can't stop. So it's like you're
You don't
just
know what
like,
else to do.
yeah. So you just keep going. And I ended up after this like super cute experience graduating in May of 2020. So my whole life's goal, I know it's hilarious. My whole life's goal
And now
was
you're
to
stuck
get
home.
a job. And all the companies I had been interviewing with went on a hiring freeze. So it was like the worst thing that could have happened. And of course, like a really wonderful thing that happened. So, but being a workaholic, and like that was my whole goal. And I was right at the finish line. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, what do I do now? I was like, am I supposed to just like wait? Like, what is that? So I was like, I need to find something to kill the time because this is crazy. And because like my hobby since like I was a young teenager was trying to figure out my purpose. I was always into like random like self-help books and metaphysical stuff. Anything that was related to purpose, I would just do that as a game. It was like a game I was playing. So to kill the time, I stumbled upon this course about the Akashic records, and I'd never heard of them. And I was like, oh, you can like ask questions and receive like insight, whatever that means. And like when I did learn about it, I was like, this sounds so fake, but it'll be a good way to pass the time. Like, why not? I have nothing else to do. And when I took that like course, I was shocked when it actually worked. I was so surprised when I began to learn how to open the records and ask questions and actually get
Actually get
responses.
those, yeah.
And at first, like a silly goose, I was like asking about different jobs. I was using the Akasha Records as like a job search engine. So I was like, what? What are the possibilities of this job? What are the possibilities of this job? And I wasn't even asking about different types of jobs. The only type of job I was asking for or asking about was technical artist. And so one day I was in the records and I asked like a more broad question. I was like, what is the potential of my career of my artistic career? And instead of artistic, I accidentally said Akashic. And so the question I ended up asking was, what is the potential of my Akashic career? And the thing I experienced through the records was so cheesy and cinematic and like wonderful. It was like the entire space of the records was filled with this like radiant white light. And I could feel it kind of coming down the way that like you could imagine like the light of like the heavens coming down. And yeah, it filled up that space. And I could feel it, the vibrance of that pure potential inside me and outside me. So it was like there was no separation between what was in me and outside of me. And I had never felt such magnificent, raw potential like that. And it was such a game changer for me because the question that I had been wondering, yearning, desperate to find some kind of insight to, like, what is my purpose? I finally got the clarity I was looking for. So that was a life-changing moment for me because up until that point, I didn't know that any other path other than what I had studied in school and getting a job in that field as a technical artist, I didn't know that anything else was available to me. So just becoming aware that life had another possibility for me was a total game changer.
Well, what's interesting to me, so I want to pause here a little bit, Meena, because if we had this conversation 10 years ago, it would seem so bizarre to the average person, right? And this existed 10 years ago. I knew plenty of people that were in this kind of field. And thousands of years ago, this existed.
Yeah.
What's happening now, and it's because of, I call it the great, repose, where we got to sit back and ponder, right? People started to ask questions, and my favorite question is, what if? Right? What if instead of doing this, I did that, right?
Mhm.
And my what ifs is, what if the story I'm telling myself is simply that, a story and not true? What
Mhm.
if I told this story differently? And so when we talk about the mind, body, spirit connection, humans are the only living things that we know of on this planet, because we don't know of any other planet, that has the capability to ponder and ask what if.
Mhm.
And so we have the capability to ask, who are we? We have, and there's a book out called The God Gene, right? We have the ability to connect with that force that has created the universe and that has created us. And we have the ability to tap into that. And that's where we're going next. Tap into that to manifest what we want in life. And guys, I'm not saying that you sit there and you close your eyes and you say, this is what I want, and then it plops in front of you. But you start to take the right action
Mhm.
towards what you desire. You start feeling into, well, this doesn't feel right. This does feel right. So I know it's crazy, but I'm going to do this thing. So, Meena, you're like, I think this is crazy, but holy crap, let me try it. I've got no job. I might as well try this. Right.
Mhm.
So you see this divine, and I want to call it divine intervention, though we are the divine. Um, and it changed your life. And so what are some of the things that you started experimenting with because of this?
Well, from that moment, I started it like unlocked this idea that like, oh, if my life doesn't only have one path, but it has two, what if it has more than two?
What
So
if?
exactly. So I totally resonate with that of like to create something in your reality, it begins with imagining the possibilities, the connecting to imagining, playing in what might be available. Like, what if this could happen? And that was something I just never did. It never occurred to me. And that's why, like, when I started working with the records, I that you can see in the questions I was asking how narrow my point of view was and how limited my beliefs of what was possible for me were because I was only asking about jobs and I was only asking about one type of job. I wasn't even asking about different positions in the whole industry. So it was so narrow. And because I asked that question on accident, which it literally never crossed my mind that I could do that as work because like,
What do you
I
do?
I don't know. I was like, I don't know. That's not like a real thing, is it? It just didn't occur to me. And yeah, so then from there I was like, oh well, what else can I do? Like what else is available for me? And so it really shattered that like almost like prison that I was in, like a captive of my own really tiny perspective. And then I was like, can I do this? The
So
records feel
so
like there's potential
let's
here.
stop right there because I want to add a couple of things. I just wrote down three names. Okay, so how did Einstein come up with the theory of the speed of light? Einstein, they say, imagined what would it happen if I sat on a beam of light. I mean, this is where your imagination, your what if, well, what would happen if, actually brings you to a real solution. This is what I want to bring this woo into, like, this is real stuff, guys, right? And then Edison, who in their right mind would take a kite in a key and know that they're going to tap into a thunderstorm and create electricity? Come on. Where does that logic come from? It comes from imagining, well, what if? Right? What is that thing? And then most recently, Elon Musk, I'm going to live on Mars. Right? I mean, this man might seem crazy to some people, but he thinks outside the box and he's not afraid to try it, to experiment, and to go for it. And some of the things that he has come up with have been almost miraculous at this point. I have seen his satellites and it looked like a string of pearls in the sky. Right? And you look up there and it's like, what is that? Right? So there's a man who not only asks what if, but why not? Right? And that's where you were going. So, well, what? Well, why not? Right?
Yeah.
Right?
And it was like tapping into that possibility that it's just a potential. They weren't telling me. And when I read for people, I'm not telling them what is going to happen in the future, but it's like, hey, this is possible. This future, this timeline is possible. And that's all that I was operating on, was like, this is a possibility. If you want it, it's there.
Mm.
And so that gave me the strength, knowing that there was another option. It gave me the strength to admit what I had known for years at that point, but was too scared to admit, was I don't want to do this thing that I've been working towards, like, basically my whole life. I don't want to, but I didn't have another choice. I didn't think I had another choice. So I just suppressed that. I just like made that quiet because I couldn't cope with it. It's like, I don't know. Like, if I can't do that, then what's the other option? There is no other way to live, is what I thought. And so now that I had two choices, like two options, I was like, oh, now we're like cooking with gas, because
Right.
now
So
I can do
I have
something.
choices. I have choices.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it was so liberating. So I was like, well, I can say no to this and say yes to something else that feels really good right now. And that like strength of knowing it was possible. That's all it was. I know that this is possible if I want it. I had to, like, I guess I found the records 2 weeks after I graduated. So maybe a month after I graduated with my master's and I'm living at home in a pandemic, I have to tell my Indian parents, hey, that degree that I just got, not gonna be using that right now, guys. So that was rough. Had to basically like close a chapter that I had been working on my whole life, right? Like, you go to school for decades, and that was my whole goal, was to get a job. I had been in college for 6 years. So it's like, that's not a small, investment of time and energy, especially the amount of like vitality I put into that.
Well, let's stop for a second there, because it's also culturally expected. So,
yeah,
so part of the anxiety you were feeling was maybe not overtly discussed, but was definitely subjective, in that you were expected to be an achiever. You were expected to go into the sciences, and you were expected to finish school and then go to work and make some money and da, 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 da. You were expected, right? And when you're a child that has this fear and this anxiety and this confusion of not knowing who I am, why I'm here, and what's going on, and you're just going through the motions, right? You're just going through the motions because that's what's expected of you. it's pretty lonesome.
And it's even more lonesome to deviate from that. So,
So talk
yeah,
about being brave enough to deviate from that.
I look back at it now and I'm like, I don't know how I did that. That was crazy. But in that moment, in because that was like a year at least of like, ooh, can I really do this? I don't know. And like just taking one tiny step at a time of like, what do I do today to move towards this? And it almost felt like I was at this crossroads of like, are you actually crazy enough to like let go of this whole ass career that you just like built and like worked towards and like got this thing or not? And so like every day it was like making a life altering decision of like, so are we still like doing this Akashic game thing today? Or like are we going back to reality today? And it would be like, okay, I'll give it one more day. And I just did that like every day until enough momentum finally gathered. And it took a long time of having no feedback that this is working to be like, okay, yeah, I think this is actually viable, like in my brain. Like I knew through the records, I knew deep in my being it was possible. But after working on it every day for over a year and nothing was happening, I began to question it. So yeah, it takes some grit and it takes like conviction to be able to stick to something like that, to trust yourself and to trust the magic of your own potential to actually follow it, because it is difficult to deviate. It's lonely to deviate from that thing. So
Expectations of others, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that I would like to touch on, so we've got the universal laws which dictate, the law of gestation, the law of time and space. There is no time and space in the fourth dimension. And we live in the fourth dimension when we are imagining, what am I going to cook for dinner tomorrow? That's in the future. And last week I was at this party and they had these great, scallops with bacon. That's the past. So that's your brain in the fourth dimension. So that's real, guys. And then you've got the fifth dimension, which is where all of the potential and possibilities are there. That's where imagination comes in. That's where traveling on the beam of light. That's where putting a key on the end of a string and hoping for the best, right? That's where creating a chain of these satellites is going to work. That is fifth dimensional stuff. And again, we are living, there you go, at least three dimensions. And the third dimension is time and space. And when you can imagine it in the fifth dimension and see it in the future in the fourth dimension, making it happen in the third dimension is exhausting. It's exhausting because, well, come on, it's already there. I see it.
Yeah.
Come on already. I see it. I know it's
Yeah.
real, right? And so to have the grit and the belief to keep on going because the law of gestation exists in the third dimension.
Yeah. And it just, I think it takes, for me, I'm so glad I had some like, just like truly naive optimism because I didn't know. I didn't know that it was going to take a long time.
Right.
I was like, yeah, it'll be here like tomorrow. And it didn't. And so that was just like an ongoing reality check for me of like, oh, this is going to take a little longer than I thought. And that would just keep happening. But yeah, and there were moments of like crisis of faith in there, and there was a lot, it was confronting in a lot of different ways. And it brought up a lot of stuff for me because once I found the records, that wasn't like, I also thought before, like the whole time I was seeking my purpose, I was like, once I find my purpose, that's it. It's like my whole life is going to be perfect
Oh my
perfect
God.
after that.
It's the magic wand.
Yeah, I really did think that. So I was like, once I got it, I was like, ooh, yay, like I'm done. Now I can just like rest in this like wonderful space
Oh,
of
right.
like
I'm going to go into lotus position and it's going to happen.
everything will happen. Yeah. And
No.
so that was a wake up call of like, oh, alignment, being connected to your purpose can look a lot of different ways. And sometimes it was hard. So once I found the records, it was like, that was just the beginning of my own like recovery process, recovering from burnout, recovering from anxiety, recovering from all the health things, because it's not like I like asked one question in the records and all that stuff just went away. It's like that took time. It took practice, working with the Akashic records and meditation over time. And then about a year after that, it just occurred to me. I was driving one day and it occurred to me like, oh, I'm not scared right now. I don't think I've ever felt this way before. I don't think I've
Oh,
ever had a moment where I wasn't scared at all. And it was such a revelation and it was so subtle. That recovery process was not like, bam, my anxiety is gone. It was like slowly over a year doing this work every day, it naturally alleviated itself. It dissipated on its own.
mhm.
And that anxiety was gone.
I
And it
know.
was amazing.
It's just like one day you realize I love when I have follow-up meetings with my clients who continue to do the work, right? And I hear things like, yeah, like I see these people and the judgment that they're involved with, and I I don't understand it anymore, right? Or I used to feel that I needed to have someone in my life to feel fulfilled, and now I look at relationships as well. That would be a bonus, but I don't need it, right? And so
Yeah, there's like a difference
there's a
that
and it's
happens.
subtle and it does take time,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's because there is an actual DNA shift going on in you. And you don't just wake up one day enlightened. It is a journey and it is a process.
Yeah, and I'm like, I wouldn't even use the word enlightened for what's going
Because
on in my
no, because you
reality. It's
never get
just like
there.
I'm not stressed out to the point of like feeling like I'm gonna die every moment.
Right.
Yeah,
And that
and that was
right,
pretty good.
right. So um I think people, all right, so I can only talk about me just like you can only talk about you. So I've heard people say, in enlightenment is like this, exotic, feeling. And for me, it's like you're not feeling um fear or anxiety. I just feel here, just here. There's really no word. There's no word in the human language for for this feeling. Um, some people call it peace. I don't even call it peace. It's just
One word that I use often is contentment. It's like, oh, I feel
yeah,
content.
yeah. And the word that I use is home, right? I
Hmm.
feel home, right? And centered in a way that is not grounding but is. And this is why there's no words for it, because it is and it is not, right? It is and it is not. um but this, you've used the Akashic records, which is awesome. I know many people, I do Akashic readings as well, right? If someone wants that, I've actually recently had someone, the records wouldn't let me in, which is very interesting. I had to call her and say, yeah, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, they do
Right.
that sometimes.
Right, because if you don't really want to hear what is there, then I can't read it, right? So there's no invasion there. Um, there's just such an evolution going on right now, such a revolution around the evolution right now. And I'm thrilled to meet people like you who have had your whole life based around facts and figures, and this is reality, and this is what you have to do, and this is what it takes, and God damn it, I'm going to, I'm going to give it my all and do this thing. It's exhausting
Mhm.
too. Wait a minute. It doesn't have to be exhausting, right? I do have to do the work. I have to do the right work.
Yeah, where you're getting some kind of feedback, because that was the thing for me. It's like I was doing everything right, like in quotes, like I was doing everything I thought I was supposed to do. And it's exactly what you said at the beginning. It's like I would get the good grade, or I would get the like positive feedback on the project or whatever at work. And I would feel good. Actually, I would feel just relieved for a few seconds. And then I would just be crushed by this like huge wave of like, oh my God, this is meaningless. Like
And I
this
have to do it again.
absolutely,
And I have to do it
yeah.
again.
So
And I
it
have to
was
do
so
even
ephemeral.
more.
Yeah. And it was so ephemeral and unfulfilling. Like I couldn't source any satisfaction out of that. I was pouring all of my vital energy into that. Like everything I had was going into that work. And I couldn't get anything out of it. Like nothing was coming back out of it. It was like this weird, endless pit I was just pouring into. It wasn't like a loop that was like giving me any kind of like fulfilling feedback. And so it was crushing and so draining. And so that's exactly what you said, I think, is the difference. It's like, it's not that you're going to never have to do work again, but it's the work or the energy you're putting into it will be worthwhile. It'll feel fulfilling.
Well,
It'll
that,
feel
and you've
good.
said the word a few times, and it's called a game. So I'm finishing my book. Um, and this particular one is crafting the flow formula. It's like, how do leaders get into flow and therefore create teams in flow to get things done? In flow. Not get things done, but get things done. And throughout the book, I realized as I was writing it, I didn't realize it until I was like rereading some of it. I keep calling this the game of life because it is just a game. And it is just, you use the word experiment. It's just an experiment, right? And so you're like, oh, yeah, I've got nothing else to lose. I'm going to try this game called Akashic Records and see what happens, right? Oh, I'm going to experiment with these questions and see what happens, right?
Yeah.
And then you got some kind of feedback and you're like, huh, I wonder if I did this instead, if I asked this question instead. I wonder if, right?
Mhm.
We
Yeah.
are curious beings. And again, we're the only animal on this planet that we know of that has that curiosity to ask what if, right? And so when you ask what if, be prepared for unexpected answers.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then
I
act
think
on it.
that's the thing. It's like that like seed of playful curiosity began on accident when the records kind of intervened and were like, "No, you're not asking the right question, so we'll just like switch this word for
Right.
you real quick.
Right. Right.
You'll
Oops.
never notice." Yeah. And, so it just began like that curiosity. I needed an intervention because I didn't have it. Like I couldn't imagine. I had no imagination. And then um well, I wasn't using my imaginative force for good. I was like really great at imagining the worst possible scenario because the anxiety, like
Right.
it kind of
Right.
distorted
Right.
that. So it
Because
like
you lived
hijacked
in
my,
fear, you lived in death, you lived in anxiety, right?
yeah. So it was like that fear hijacked my imagination. And so it was like using it to like create all these like horrible possibilities in my mind. And so, yeah, I needed an intervention to see how imagination could be used in a different way. And then from there, it was like, oh, okay, now I know you can ask like more than one kind of question to the Akashic records. And then from there, I was like, okay. So it was like starting to ask different questions in the records and then starting to ask different questions in my own mind. and then starting to play with that, like, what if energy in my actions in my life of like, well, what if? And it starts as just a thought, and then you can decide to like take it as an experiment and see what'll actually happen if you do it. Like if you're crazy enough to do it, like, what
Right.
if I had told my parents I'm not doing this? Like, what might happen? And it's like, what if I actually like did that? What if I actually did pursue this as work? I have no idea what that looks like. I don't know anything about the Akashic records or like having like your own like business or type of work or whatever. But like, what if I just tried something? And then it's like, yeah, it kind of gets the ball rolling. So it's like taking that like playful, like practicing, imagining, and then like pulling that into your actions in small ways. And that could be like, okay, I'm gonna practice doing this thing a little bit more. I'm gonna do something small. And it was like those little things that kind of led to the bigger experiments of like really letting go of like a whole, like decade long thing that I had been working on.
Right. And the curiosity and then taking action on that curiosity is what creates magic, right? um I think because of that experience that you had, and so many people had miraculous experiences because of having to sit home and figure it out. Because of that, people are now questioning their life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that is something that is not only necessary now, it has always been necessary. It has always been necessary to question, is this the only way? Is this, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, this is cool, this is working, but is this the only way?
Yeah, it's like just, I think like I love that. Like, and I often say like question everything because I think that process, that practice of checking in, being like, does this still feel good? Right?
Right.
At it like that, even if you just ask that one question every now and then, does
Right.
this still feel good?
And if the answer is yes, then you go, cool. If the answer is
Great.
no, then go, well, what would feel good?
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. And then you can move from there, but it helps you not be stagnant and
Yes.
complacent and
Yes.
stuck. So, yeah. And then if you do get to a point where you're stuck, that's okay too, because there's even a way out of that.
Well,
So,
sometimes we're stuck um, because we need time to percolate.
yeah.
Right. We need to percolate. Again, we're talking about the law of gestation, right? And I'm the type of person that if I sit for a while and think about what I want to do, I think about and imagine, and I don't take action, and I think about it, and then sometimes I think, well, yeah, how long are you gonna think about it before you take action, right? Um, but then when I do take action from the outside, it looks like I'm jumping in and going full force, when in fact, for years, maybe I've been thinking about what this would look like. And so the taking action is a manifestation of getting all of those energies and those thought processes and the potentials kind of straight in my own mind and my own physicality, if you will. But it is the law of gestation. I'm letting it sit and simmer for a while, right? I
Mhm.
will tell you, whenever I just jump in and don't simmer on it for a while, it blows up in my face. Always, always. I have to
Yeah.
let it
And
gestate.
and I think that's why it's like practicing these things in tiny, tiny steps. It's like then you aren't like going like leaps and bounds in one direction that you don't really know if it actually feels good. It's like take things one step at a time.
Right,
And see how it goes. Keep checking in.
right, right. And it's okay if someone else is doing the same thing with you, because there are billions of people in the world, right? There's plenty of resources to go around. More than plenty of resources to go around. So don't have a lack mindset. There is no There is no lack. It's just another story that we tell ourselves. Right. And so you have been telling yourself amazing stories. And I love this intervention. You needed an intervention on your imagination. That's fantastic. I might call this episode Intervention on Your Imagination. And so, Meena, is there anything else that you want people to know about you and how they could get in touch with you if they want more information?
Yeah, if you're looking for more, if you're curious about the records and want to get like the little taste, I have some like free Akashic goodies on my website. I have a guided visualization channeled from the Akashic records. I teach a free meditation class. And if you're curious more about my one-on-one work with people and what that looks like, you can also schedule a free chat with me. So there's lots of fun things to get started with. I also have like, I think it's like over 90 like videos on my website where I'm channeling from the Akashic records. So there's lots of stuff to get started over there. And my website is meenaruchi.com.
Okay.
So yeah.
And that'll all be, there'll be ways to get in touch with her in the show notes. So again, Meena, thank you. And everybody, thank you for listening to the Empowering Process podcast. If there's something here that piqued your curiosity, or if you have a question, do comment and let us know, and maybe we'll get back together and address it for you. And if you know someone who could benefit from this, do share it out to them. And always, please do subscribe, let us know that you care, because we care. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye, Meena.
Bye, thank you.
Craft. Thank you for listening to the Empowering Process podcast. Be sure to visit Gail at gailcraft.com to learn more about how she serves thought leaders, entrepreneurs, and goal seekers. And remember, if you like this broadcast, be sure to share and subscribe so you don't miss an episode.